What would happen if the government gave people cash with no strings attached? Imagine you got a check that ranged somewhere between 15 to 20% of your annual income. How would that affect you? What would it improve for yourself, your children, your community? Here's what people need to understand about universal basic income. Universal basic income is a concept that has been floated around by politicians and academics. It's this idea that if you provide income to a large group of the population, it may have positive impacts in a variety of ways. One is it's sort of the sense of security that people have a subsistence level of income, so their basic needs are met with regard to housing or food or clothing. That might result in an improvement in conditions, both for the current generation, but also subsequent generations, the children. They're raised in households that have more resources, and society as a whole benefits from this. The breadth and the existence of research on this topic has really been constrained because we don't have lots of these experiments, especially where people are given large amounts of money or relatively large amounts of money universally. Currently, there are a number of small pilot projects throughout the United States in various cities to examine the impact of that. This study takes place in the Great Smoky Mountains, and it's an American Indian reservation located in Appalachia and surrounded by a variety of other counties that are collected in a data set called the Great Smoky Mountain Study of Youth. And it is a data set that was focused at relatively young adolescents. And it's a longitudinal survey. And that's really the key in this research environment, is the ability to follow the same child year after year into actually adulthood. What that has allowed us to do is to look at the impact of the opening of a tribal casino. We have a before, we have an after, we have a group that gets affected by the tribal casino and the cash transfers, and we have a group that doesn't. So in our first study using this data, the Great Smoky Mountain Study of Youth, we look at a variety of outcomes. One is educational attainment and completion, and we find that the children from the households that received this cash transfer, and in particular, the children from households that were in poverty, we see the largest effects there. And we see their probability of completing high school go up in a statistically significant and positive manner. We see that the number of years of education by age 21 are about a year longer. In an extension to the analysis that we originally conducted, we were able to identify the existence through public voting records of the individuals who were raised in these households with higher income compared to their counterparts that were not. And what we found is that the children from these households were more likely to participate at a higher percentage rate in elections every single year during their adulthood. It's this secondary effect from the cash transfers. We see higher educational attainment, but as a result, that also translates into another sort of civic outcome, which is voting and participation. One other subset of analyses that we conducted is a look at a variety of psychopathologies that may develop over time in adolescence and young adulthood, as well as measures of personality traits and skills, which economists are increasingly interested in as components that factor into educational attainment and employment longevity. And what we found is that for the children who come from the households that receive this extra household income, they have increased measures of openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, key personality traits that are thought to work well in an educational environment as well as work environments. And so that was sort of a unique outcome. And one of the findings we have is that there's a reduction of 1 to 2 symptoms in depression or anxiety for the children who are coming from these households that may help explain why they're able to achieve higher levels of educational attainment overall. There's often criticism that universal basic income programs will really sort of create these disincentives to work. People will have low levels of active participation in the labor force. In our analysis, while we didn't have hours worked per week, we had a very sort of blunt measure of, are you working full-time, part-time, or out of the labor force? We found very little change in those admittedly blunt measures. We took a look at the amount of income that these households were receiving through the universal basic income in this particular case. And it's a large amount. It's 20 to 25% of household income, but it's clearly not enough to completely sustain a household's income needs. And so, as a result, we didn't see a large reduction in employment. This extra household income really is salient and really cuts in the communities that are the most constrained financially. In this situation, we can really see what sort of releasing that lever or that constraint of poverty does for children's outcomes. And we would expect that this would be a result that would translate to other populations as well.